everything that is bad about the EU, everything every Brexiteer warned against, everything that is wrong about lumbering, oversized, and increasingly dictatorial bureaucracies is being played out right before our eyes this week in Brussels' shameful, spiteful response to a cock-up entirely of its own making. You'll have guessed I'm talking about the fact the EU forgot to order any COVID vaccine. No, it's worse than that. It wasn't just a failure of oversight or even the glacially slow decision making, held up inevitably by the EU's sheer size and overwhelming control freakery, but Brussels actually effectively stopped the member states from saving their own citizens' lives. Member states were effectively banned from sourcing their own COVID vaccines lest it reflect badly on the EU's notion of itself as a benign superstate and of course its grip on centralized control. Oh, and so a French vaccine would be commercially favored over the British one. That's the one that doesn't work, by the way. Astonishingly, Germany quietly secured a stash of vaccine for itself. More astonishingly, Mrs. Merkel is sitting on that stash until all EU nations have received their allotted doses instead of getting it into German arms. You probably don't need to be a trained epidemiologist to conclude many human beings might die as a result of these particularly mindless pieces of adherence to one EU dogma. It's also terrible that when all this is over, the EU's conduct should be properly investigated as the crime it so obviously looks like to the man on the Essen omnibus. Dogma is the enemy of good politics. Indeed, of any good decision making. And this awful scandal is proof, were any further proof needed, of why Britain was right to cut ties with this now, by definition, dangerous organization. And it gets worse. Today we learned that our friends in Brussels intend to consign more people to an early death by banning, or severely restricting, exports of any and all COVID vaccine from the EU. And the people who will die this time are likely to be British. Some might see that as tantamount to an act of war, and it would be hard not to have some sympathy with that view. Here's the thing. Whatever the hue of your politics, it is clear that Britain anticipated the vaccine need better and acted faster than the EU. We got to the front of the queue. The fact AstraZeneca now has production problems is unfortunate, but frankly it's the EU's problem. Admittedly, not much of this seems fair, in that cut and dried way we British admirers of cricket appreciate. It's a mess and there's no perfect solution. But why should a grandma in Tunbridge Wells have to forego her chance of safety from COVID, and maybe even her life, because Brussels was simply too thick to see this coming? Ursula von der Leyen does not get to play God on this one and chose who lives and who dies. First come, first served has to be the way, both commercially and morally, but not for the EU. So tomorrow the EU Commission, whose fault this is, will seek to impose a mechanism by which EU countries will be able to block vaccine exports if the EU's own purchase orders have not yet been filled. This is vile protectionism of the worst kind, the kind indeed the EU professes to loathe. It out-Trumps Trump both in its scale and its malice. Not just Britain but Australia and Canada will be hit. Under the scheme, the EU will instruct its customs authorities to block vaccine exports unless they come with a prior authorization. That will allow the EU to prioritize shipments to its own countries before authorizing exports. In short, stuff you Britain. It perhaps tells us nothing we hadn't already gleaned from 4 long years of Brexit negotiations during which the EU treated Britain like something it had trodden in. One final piece of advice for our friends in Brussels. A new coronavirus vaccine called Novavax is being made in Stockton-on-Tees in northeast England. You might want to get your order in today.